When the Hungarians came into our city, I was 13 years old. By 1942, I was 15 years old, and that's when the so-called Nuremberg laws came into being. If you're not familiar with what I said, it's actually basically the terrorism against Jews started. It started with just the restriction like you cannot be lawyers, you cannot be doctors, you cannot be any kind of political appointee. That's how it started. And it kept going, more restrictions, more restrictions. By the time I was 15 years old, we were not allowed, at that time, I had been in the yeshiva for about 6 months. And they restricted no more yeshivas, no more Jewish schools, many kind of restrictions. All right. In 1944 is when they started to gather the Jews into the ghetto. And this will come up numerous times, sometimes I made a lucky step, and sometimes I made a foolish step or unlucky step. In any case, there was in our town, there was a place where Jewish soldiers, they were called munkaszolgálatos, which means work details. They were not regular soldiers, but at that age they had to go into the army. What ultimately wound up with these people was they were sent to Ukraine with the Hungarian army, and they were digging the ditches, they were picking the mines, and so on. And many, many perished. Very few came back. So there was such thing, rumors. The general in charge of this place, where they were assembling the soldiers, was very Jewish friendly. So rumors circulated, and I wound up going to volunteer into the army. Now, I was too young, but there were 5 of us who did that. He listened to us, and then he said, listen guys, go back to the stables, clean the stables. I don't want to hear or see any of you again. That's it. So we became soldiers. One day, they asked for volunteers to push a wagon to the ghetto to pick up food from warehouses or Jewish stores and to bring it to the ghetto. And I volunteered. With me was a little metal valise, aluminum valise, and the handle of it was empty. You could open the edge and to stick there a letter. I wrote a letter to my mom, because we were not allowed to go into the ghetto. They sent out some guys who took the wagon into the ghetto. I wrote a note to my mom. Mom, I don't, is there something you want to tell me that I might or might not do? So she said, look, your younger sister is already in jail on a suspicion of communism. Your older brother is in Ukraine. Your father, your older sister is with me, and your father is alone. So maybe it would be a good idea for you to come in and you be with your father. Because like I said, rumors were flying around, all kinds of rumors. The rumor was they're going to take us to Germany, separately men and women, and we're going to work and we'll be well taken care of. That was the rumor. So my father, by the way, where is it?
Pictures.
Oh, it's circulating? Okay, it's circulating. Okay. That's it? You all saw it. I just wanted you to have an idea what my background is. So, we pushed back the wagon to the armory there, and then I started to speculate what maybe I can find at home if I could get back into the place where we lived to take it with me to the ghetto and then go and volunteer to the ghetto. It was a market day. You have to know the old country how it used to be. Tuesday and Friday we used to have market day. And so I picked the market day so that they don't spot me immediately, because there are many people who knew me. And I circulated around my house, and all of a sudden I see the landlord who lived in the same house came out, walked over to a policeman and pointed his finger at me. So the policeman arrested me. I was in jail there for a few days, and then they took us into the ghetto. That's how then I wound up in the ghetto. Now, from the ghetto, we were in the ghetto, I don't know, maybe 2 months. I don't know how long. I don't remember exactly. They loaded us up on what do you call it, wagons?
Trains.
What kind of train where you ship?
Kettle.
Kettle.
Yeah, kettle.
It's called a kettle box or something?
Cattle cars.
Kettle wagon or
Cattle cars.
kettle train, right. Now, all I remember is that more or less 80 people were put into a wagon. They told us maximum that you take with you is no more than 20 kilos. That was originally what you were allowed to take in the ghetto. Well, 20 kilo is 20 kilo, but it still takes room. Now imagine 80 people in a wagon, and I don't remember what was our toilet necessity, how it was handled. I don't remember when we got food, because we all had some food with us. So every now and then you heard the whistle of the train, and that somehow had the sound of worse things are coming, that kind of a feeling. It was like stabbing you. Anyhow, I have no memories of the train itself, inside. like I said, nothing. It's just that I remember we were like herring, like this. Okay. And then all of a sudden the doors opened. When the door opened, all of a sudden there was a sound like, "Welcome to hell." If you can visualize, aussteigen, aussteigen means get off, get off, get off. SS soldiers with dogs barking, and then there were some Häftlinge, a group of camp Jews. Their assignment was to push the people forward and to make them get off the train and so on. So that was the how do you do. That was how we arrived. And now they separated men and women. There was an incident, an SS guy noticed that my father was carrying something under his jacket. He had a Gemara with him. You thought you're going somewhere where you can read the Gemara. All I know at that moment is that he threw my father down. I was moving forward and I kept looking back. I heard the shot, and that's it. I didn't see my father again. I don't know if he was killed there or he was killed later, but I didn't see my father again. You probably have seen, I think, movies and things of how the selection was going on. Under a lamp at the far, in the front, way there, stood Mengele with a stick. And as the men I was between the men, as we came forward, he just did like this. You go left, you go right, like that. Now, we didn't know where we are, what, nothing. We just all of a sudden surrounded with dogs and SS beating left and right. And we went through the selection and we kept going. The one thing I remember, as we were marching past some bushes that covered the other side. And on the other side, I heard mourning, and I heard somebody calling Shema Yisrael. The marchers into a barrack. You saw the Birkenau barracks. If you did, you know what I'm talking about. They marched us into one barrack. And the guy in charge of the barrack was a gypsy. A real vicious guy. Here is the reception. Welcome to hell. You are now in the concentration camp of Birkenau, Auschwitz. The smoke that you saw is where your father and mother got burned. The smell that you smell is their burning flesh. That was his introduction. The next thing he said was, if you have anything like diamonds hidden in your shoe, you better put it out now because we're going to examine you later, and if we find something that you didn't declare, see it over there? That's where we're going to hang you. That was the how do you do. That was the reception. Now, they brought us into a place where we took shower, and later it turned out that this is one of the rooms that had showers on it, but if you didn't get showers, you got the poison gas. That's how they killed the people. They told us they had numbered hooks, and they said, remember the hook where you put your clothing, and then go and take a shower. So like I said, if the water came, you were lucky. And the alternative was cyclone gas was thrown on the roof, and the gas went in and killed everybody. Later, if you go now to Auschwitz and you see that room or those rooms, you see how people in desperation were scratching the walls. Okay. We took showers. We were taken into another room where we got the striped uniform. You all know what I'm talking about, I think, what they look like, striped blue and white. Next day, we got tattooed here. I carry my number here. If you're curious enough, you're welcome to see it later. A day or so later, we marched from Birkenau to Auschwitz, what was called the main camp of Auschwitz, which had the entrance Arbeit macht frei on it. You all know what I'm talking about, I hope. And now we were in great buildings, beautiful built, and we was given food, small rations, but food, and about 4 to 6 times a day, you had to go out for what they call the Zellabel, which means to count you. Okay, one day, that's where I found out who Mengele was. Mengele walked by me like this, put his stick on the guy on my right, and then to some guy on the left. He picked them out for the purpose of experimenting. Some of these guys had terrible ends, death. That was what we were doing in the big camp in Auschwitz. Now, every day, rumors circulated that they are coming to pick technicians, like watchmakers, metal workers, all kinds of technicians. So you figured if you're going to work in your profession, things must be easier than if you're assigned to you don't know where. So that was the time to volunteer. They came in, they said, Tishla, cabinet maker. How do you say that in Hebrew?
Nagarim.
Nagar.
Nagav.
Nagar.
Nagar.
Yes.
And I apprenticed cabinet making when I was 15 years old, and they stopped letting us learn in the yeshiva. What else can you do? You go to apprentice. And I was apprenticing to work with wood. So I volunteered. And about 25 people were picked, because they call people, if you know how to work with horses, if you know how to work on field. Anyhow, 25 people were selected. And we didn't know where we were going. They marched us out under the big door outside of the camp, and sitting left in the ditch, were a bunch of guys bleeding and hurting and with bandages. Hey guys, where are you coming from? Landwirtschaft Birken. That's when we heard the first time the name. It turned out that we 25 were replacing that 25 in the camp which was called Landwirtschaftshof Birkenau. Now, to give you an idea where the location of this camp was, if
You want to draw?
no, I just on the point. I need
A
something
distance.
square. Yeah. Good. If you visualize, no.
Okay.
If you, let's see it. If you visualize Auschwitz being here in the middle, you have Buna, Babitz, Katowice, and Birkenau. These are the four out, like a village outside the city. Okay? Buna, Babitz, Katowice, and Birkenau. We were assigned to a camp that was in this corner, a separately gated camp, and it was like a farm. Horses, carpenters, smith, tools, warehouse, and so on. And we were approximately 150 and sometimes 180 people. So it was basically a small camp. Now I want to describe to you how we were received. The Hauptsturmbannführer was a high-ranking officer who was in control of this camp. And he used to ride around in a beautiful white stallion. And he was actually an Austrian, so he spoke with an accent, but gargling. What? Where? That kind of a sound. So they lined us up, 2 rows, and there was a a Slovakian guy who was already in Auschwitz for 3 or 4 years, who was an interpreter if somebody didn't speak German. So he said, raise your hand if you know how to work with horses. And by a fluke of accident, in the last 2 years, before we went into ghetto, we had a couple of horses and a kutscher, guy who was working with them. And I used to watch him, and I used to go with the horses. So I want to point out that in all cases in Germany, you always had the smallest guy in the front, and then up like that. That's how we had to stand in line. And I was always in the right front corner because I was a very short fellow. So I put up my hand. Ah! He looks at me. Pupil. Pupils means in German kid. Pupil. He throws at me a rope. A rope which you use to bring a horse from one place to another. It's a simple rope, no harness, nothing. You just put the... I remember seeing our kutscher, whenever he approached the horse, he always went like that. And he wanted to put the rope on him. He put the rope on his hand, gave something to the horse, and then put the rope on his head, on the horse's head. So he throws at me the rope. I take the rope and put it on my hand, and I'm approaching the horse. Okay, they knew that I knew what I was talking about. Fine. Then they picked several people to work with horses, to stable, and so on. Then they said, we need Tischler. As I said before, a Tischler is a
Carpenter.
carpenter. I don't need it. I don't need this either. So, up in my hand. Again I hear, Jubel! Zeig mir eine Hände. Show me your hands. And it so happens that while we were in the ghetto, we had to dig some dishes. So my hand was worked out. Okay. He looks at my hand and he points to a little cabin-like a place, and he says, go and see the Vorarbeiter over there. You speak about being in the right place in the right time. This was one time when I was really lucky. Why? It turns out that we were a few carpenters, the smith, so we were under a roof. We were not immediately supervised by any SS. In other words, during the day, we stood at the window, made a little noise so that they know we are working, and we were free. Also, fire. The smith had fire. If we managed to get some potatoes or something that can be cooked, We were able to cook it, and we had extra food. So in many cases, we managed to give our soup to somebody else. So, like I said, this was one big lucky thing for me when I got but we were down where I showed you. Up here were the crematoria. And every now and then we had to work right up next to the crematoria. There was a bush, which was a stop. You couldn't go on the other side of the bush. But we saw everything. We knew everything. We knew when the Warsaw Ghetto was brought in to Auschwitz. We knew when the Lodger Ghetto was brought in. These are two big cities in Poland where they had big Jewish
Communities.
huh?
Communities. At the time of the war, Lodz had the same population of Jews as Tel Aviv has today, and they were almost all wiped out. Just
Okay, so if you can visualize, if there is a little fog in that area, and we are down here looking in that direction, and you see the sparks in the fog, that's what we were looking at day in, day out. But you get to be like a zombie. You get to be like a zombie. You stop feeling. You just know you hear this, you hear that, but you don't react. I was in that camp, at that work, till January 18, 1945. January 18, 1945. That's when we liquidated Auschwitz. Everything in Auschwitz was either destroyed or liquidated. We had the farm, they had pigs, and they had a few cows, but not for us, for the SS. And wagons, and we started to march. And that's where we learned what is a dead march. Can you visualize Poland, which is Eastern Europe? The winter is very, very vicious winter. And as you were marching, you would see the snow and blood, again snow, blood. And as you were, if somebody stopped for a minute and he couldn't continue, the job of the SS near us was to kill him. So we saw the result of that. We marched, I don't know, for maybe a week, 10 days, something like that. In the interim, we were not given food, or if they gave us food, they gave us so little that really was just. And there too I had a little muzzle. What was my muzzle? In your jacket, inside, there is a place for a spoon. So you always carry the spoon just in case you get given food or something. And the other end of the spoon we rubbed down for a knife. So that was the knife. And as we were marching, the wagons were in front of us from our camp. As we were marching, I found myself in front of the wagon because people kept falling back, and I'm now near the wagon, and it's night. And then I remembered, they put the pigs, they killed the pigs and they put them on the wagon. So I crawled slowly up in the back to the pig, cut myself a piece of his skin, and that carried me on for the next, 10 days, just to chew on it. Again, a lucky minute. We arrived to a city called Breslau. And there they put us on open wagons, and now you have to visualize open wagon. We had blankets. Some of us had blankets. I don't know how. Yes, how no. Some of us had blankets. So it's cold. The train is moving. It's cold. So what do? You cover yourself with a blanket. However, that turned out to be the end of a lot of guys because they fell asleep and no oxygen. And by the time we were going by train to Buchenwald. By the time we got to Buchenwald, we were able to sit on porches this high, because a lot of guys died on the way. Now I arrived in Buchenwald. I outlined my history so that I can follow it in sequence. Okay. Okay. In Buchenwald, I was there for a short while. By the way, when I needed for restitution, I needed documentation that I was in this camp, in that camp. They found that I arrived in Buchenwald on that date, and I was there to so many days, and then I left. It was all recorded. And also Auschwitz, so I had all the documentation. But now I'm in Buchenwald. They sent us out to a place called Brabak factory. Brabak factory was a factory that made gasoline. And obviously it was damaged by airplanes. This is now, I'm talking about, let's see, somewhere around February 1945. At that time, as we later saw, every morning around 10 o'clock, the sky became gray with American bombers going somewhere to bomb. And then in the afternoon or later on, you saw them coming back. Now, when the planes came, the siren sounded, and the officers had the bunker, and the SS chased us about a kilometer and a half to a sand mine. What is a sand mine? Sand mine is a big hole in the ground where they go to hunt for sand. Now the sand mine, every step on the way you always have lucky or unlucky. The sand mine. If you stood near the wall, there were two choices. You either stood near the wall like this, or you ran in the middle and huddled down. When the airplanes came and bombed our factory, we ran, and the guys who stood near the wall got covered with sand. And they got killed right there and there. The perimeter of this sand mine was where the soldiers were guarding us. Like I said, this was a period where bombing was continuous. Oh yeah, I have a note here that says what happened one time when they bombed. When they came bombing, sometimes they bombed on the left side or right side of the factory, but very seldom exactly in the center. And this time, exactly in the center, in the bunker where the officers were hiding, was near a big gas tank or oil tank. And a bomb went in there, and the bunker was covered with either gas or oil, I don't remember what. And those guys got burned completely. The heat took care of all of them. The officers all were wiped out. Okay? We were lucky because we had to run a kilometer and a half or something. All right, that was that. From that factory, when it got bombed out completely, there was no more room for us to work, so they took us on a dead march again. This was February and April 1945, that all camps were moved around. And to this day, the mystery why they moved us from one place to another, why they held on to us, is still a mystery to me. Because by April 1945, there was no doubt that the war was at end. So what did they need, what's called Hiftlinger? What did they need us for? But for some reason they did it, they hauled us around, and during that period, from about 1,000 of us, maybe 100 was left. By the time we got where they were taking us, which was Theresienstadt. Some of you might know the name. This was a camp in Czechoslovakia, not far from Prague. Because we were marching on the Austro-Czech border like that. One day this way, one day that way. This camp was originally a military fort. Now, when they took us there, the buildings were big, strong buildings, and they put, I don't know how many in a room, no chairs, nothing. We slept on the floor, of course, and like that. I don't remember what kind of food we got, but after a few days, the food ran out. Imagine. There was a window, and if you looked out the window, you see another building there, and I don't know who came up with the statement, that's a Canada. What does Canada mean in our language, in the camps? Canada meant it's a place where they took all the clothing and everything that they took off the people before they took them to the gas chamber, and they just piled it up. You saw somewhere probably shoes, piles of shoes, piles of glasses, and so on. Now, if you could get into that building, there probably is some food over there. And that, I didn't know what's going to happen. I was so hungry, I took my chance, I crawled out the window and I went down to that place. Sure enough, I found all kinds of rucksack bags with food, and I ate, and I fell asleep. All of a sudden, I feel it, boom, there is a couple with another guy. These are, you know what, you all know what is a couple. A couple was usually a German who was put into the concentration camp, and there he was in charge of us Jews. Anyhow, they beat me up, but I had a full stomach. And I think that's what rescued me at that time. I have a good feeling. Anyhow, I had to crawl back into that window, and now, here comes we are sitting in these rooms, and by this time everybody was full with lice. So what you did for the amusement of the day, you were killing your lice from your body. There was no going to work, we were just sitting there waiting. Why? We don't know. All of a sudden, somebody says, look, there is the Russian flag. And that's where we realized that we were liberated. And this was May 8, 1945, which is officially the end of the war. So we were under the being killed right up to the date. We are free. So word came out that we'll be getting food. The Russians brought food. Okay, now we ate food. Ate. The Russians gave what they had, and some of that was very fat. And imagine shrunken stomachs, and all of a sudden we developed a fleck typhus fever. That decimated the camp again. So many people died from it, like I said, it decimated the camp. After liberation, this is after liberation, I was so skinny that a little girl like this one here, who they brought in from the villages surrounding our camp, they brought in nurses and nurses' helpers, and one came and bathed me. And she gave me some prunes. Also, prunes. That's how I remember that moment. And I was really so sick that they put me out. There was a row there were cabinets flat on the floor, and sick people were lined up like that. And then was a place they lined up people who looked like they're dying, like beyond help. And I crawled back from that place into this other place. That was another miracle, if you will, another lucky move. Now we are so what do? We pick the lies, like I said, and now we found out that we are liberated. Now goes the discussion. Now what? Now what? What we experienced made us feel like this camp is the only place where some Jews survived. There is no more Jews anywhere because of what we saw. We are, like I said, 1945. One guy says, at least in our lifetime we'll never see a war again. Now that was some statement. It really seemed so realistic at that moment, you would have sworn that that's going to be the case. Well, I think the first war started in India, if I remember correctly, but that's neither here nor there. Now, in my mind, I had a negotiation with God. If by some miracle you bring back somebody from my family, I'll be behind them for the rest of my life. And he heard me. Here is the result. Imagine when I got to my hometown, because after, like I said, liberation, we were fed, we were sick for a few weeks, and then what is there to do? To go back to your hometown and see if anybody survived. The trains at that time were going and stopping, and there were always Russian trains with machinery that they picked up in all these areas, and they had priority. So the train would go for a certain distance, and then it would stop, and so on. Okay, but we are on the way home. When I arrived in my hometown, I found my younger sister there. That's when I found out that she went through a lot of torture when they first took her in 1943, arrested her, because she worked as a seamstress in a place where the lady who owned the seamstress place was a communist. And that's when they started to torture Jews to tell us who is a communist and so on. Okay. And what we did at that time is go to the trains, wait, see if some Jewish people got off the train, and ask, did you see these people? Do you know my sister's name? And one day, I found somebody who says to me, not only is your sister alive, your mother is also alive. Now that was a real amazement. Okay, my sister arrived, my mother arrived, and a few months later, my brother arrived. He too was brought back from Ukraine into a concentration camp, and that's where he survived. I cannot tell you in words what that meant to me then and now to this day. Show the picture. From 6 people in our family, 5 of us survived. That was the biggest number of survival in a family in our hometown. There were only 2 women at the age of my mother, 52 years old, who came back from the camps. You know what that meant to me? And if God wanted to talk to me, he would have to wait till I finished talking to my mother. That's how sacred she was. This was a time, imagine, people were arriving back, orphans, one in a family, no small children at all in the whole city. We were originally 3,000 souls in our hometown, Jewish people, and back came about 10%. But not an old person, no old people, no children. You just saw people our age. So that's what it meant for me to have my family back. I am sending around the picture that we took after liberation. Thank you. Now you know the history of my experiences during the war. If you like, I'll continue and I'll tell you what happened to me after. It might be amusing, it might not, but if you want to leave, this is the time.
Let's have another 15 minutes about we have another 15 minutes. You can talk about the experience going to America and life as a soldier.
What did you say, 15 minutes?
Yeah, we have another 15 minutes before we're not giving them the option to go or...
Okay. At some point, when we got back home, at some point, word goes around, what are we going to do now? And all the Jewish boys said they should try to go to Israel. And then in 1946, January or February, with a few other guys, we crossed over to Hungary, from Hungary to Austria, and into Germany, and some of them wound up in Italy to go to make Aliyah. I was a hot Zionist at that time, and of course, now we were at that period, we were in what we call Displaced Persons Camp, DP camp, where the Jews that came back from Eastern Europe, they were put in different places, in some instances in the very concentration camp that they were before under the Germans. That's where they had room to put, because Germany was bombed out, especially Munich. So that's where we registered, or in my instance, one day a shaliach comes, a guy comes, introduces himself that he's a shaliach from the Haganah, and he's looking for volunteers who are single, alone, and he's willing to take chances because this is a dangerous move. That's all he had to say. Up went the hands, including mine. I was alone, including mine. So I wrote a note to my mother, please, Mom, be aware of the fact that I'm leaving somewhere where I don't think I'll be able to write to you for the next period of time. Don't worry. That's it. I get a note back the day before we are supposed to go to wherever this shaliach is taking us. The day before that, I get a note from my mom which says, look, your brother left here some time ago via Constanța, which is the port in Romania, and he is now in Cyprus. And they are talking about wars and this and that. And look, I don't want you to try to go to Israel. Go to your aunt in New York, and then we'll see later. Now, like I said to you before, when my mother said something to me that was holy, so I saw the shaliach and I told him, listen, I volunteered yesterday, but I cannot join you because of that. He said, if your mother is alive, if she tells you not to go, don't go. That's it. By the way, the group wound up on Exodus ship. If I wouldn't have gone, if I would have continued to go, I would have been on the Exodus ship, for whatever it's worth. History. A good move, bad move, and so on. So, we found ourselves on May the 14th. I embarked from Bremenhaven on the way to America. In the DP camps we had food, but nothing fancy. But when we got on that boat and we saw a table, the way the ship made out the table, first time I saw grapefruit in my life and so on. So it was a machaya. Waiting for me in New York was my uncle, who sent me an affidavit to be able to immigrate. He was a working man. Basically, you know, I didn't have a rich uncle waiting for me. Anyhow. First day we had dinner, and my aunt asked me, what do you think you want to do? And I said, I want to start working as soon as I can in order to earn money for the first time in many, many years that I will support myself. I will pay from my labor of my hands. 24 hours later, I was already in a cabinet shop. I was working as a cabinet maker. My uncle had a friend, that's it. Now, this is 1948, 49, 50. 50, the war in Korea broke out. And all people of my age had to register in post office to tell the government where you are and what your address is and so on. Sure enough, I got drafted in the army. But again, a little muzzle was behind me, and they took me to Germany. And other guys went to, if you were in the east of America, you were sent to Europe. West of America, you were sent to Korea. Imagine the Korean War, whatever you know about it, it was not great for sure. Now, maybe I should tell you. Maybe yes, maybe no. Here it comes. I was assigned to the intelligence section in the army, in a headquarters battery. So what did I spend my time with? First chance I had, I went into town and looked for Jews, and it was like, how can you make a couple of bucks? It turns out that during the period of 45, 6, 7, and 8, there was nothing could be bought only on black market. I said, yeah, I know how to do that. And I managed to make enough money. In the meantime, my mother left for Israel in 48, and I managed to buy her an apartment. Now, I want to tell you, if all of a sudden you would be able to buy, what should I say, the biggest building, somebody would toss it into your lap. That's what it meant. I was so proud of myself, I cannot express you this. Okay, that was the army. I was busy planning how to get out to be able to do some business. 48, 72, I'm out of the army. I went to work again as a cabinet maker, and then a couple of years later, I decided to take advantage of the GI Bill, which is a government thing that they help veterans, especially those who were during a war in the army, that they help you to pay for tuition to learn. And I wanted to take advantage of it, and that's how I wound up in college. And I was there for 4 years. And then, in the interim, I have to step back. I had in the army, I had 6 days coming to me, furlough, and the captain, when he saw my number, he said to me, "David, anything I can do for you, feel free to come." I went to him and I said, "I only have 6 days and I want to go to visit my mother in Israel." 6 days? Okay. He manipulated and made 18 days out of it. Thursday, 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, then my 6 days, then again 1 day passed, 2 days passed, 3 days passed, which he could do legally. Okay. My arrival to Israel, Freignish, that was some experience. To prepare to go to Israel, and I knew that they are starving in Israel. So I bought food, about 600 kilos, including kosher salami and so on. And I'm at the port, and I hear a couple of guys unloading, and they speak Hungarian. So I went to uniform, "Hey, guys, me too, Magyar." "So what do you got there?" And I told him what I have there. And one guy says, "Fruit, oh, perot." I said, "Perot? I am going to Eretz Zavat Chalav with Vash." That I remembered from Kedar. Another guy says, "This guy has illusion where he's going." Okay. Anyhow, we arrived, that's how I arrived to Kazan. Now, going forward, I'm now in college, and then I go out of college. When I finished college, because my mother wanted to see her son, who's now an engineer. I was a technical engineer, technician engineer. And so I sold everything and I went to Israel. I was hoping to find a job and settle in Israel then. And I had an uncle who had a factory, and I used to visit with him, and I consulted with him. I said, "What do you think I could do? This is my education," and so on. He says, "Your kind of education is dime a dozen here in Israel, and they don't have anything to work. My suggestion to you is go back to America, build up a little business and make some money, and then come to Israel." Okay. Now I found myself in a city called Antwerp because my older sister, and this is my niece, by the way, was stuck in Romania. They all of a sudden decided, the Romanian government, not to give exit visas. That's it. But with the Romanian government, you could always do some business. And I was told, because between Jews, all you have to do is put out the call, and there's always somebody who can tell you what you can do about your problem. Sure enough, somebody told me, go to Antwerp. In Antwerp, the diamond dealers are from all over the world. They will tell you what to do. I arrived to Antwerp. I'm introduced to somebody by the name of komkommer in Dutch. That means pickle. Mr. Pickle. Yeah, it will cost you 3,500 for each of the parents. They were 2 children and husband and father. I went out, and there were some people that originally came from my hometown. I went and I secured money, because everybody I talked to, if it's a question of getting Jews out of the Iron Curtain, we'll help. It's amazing to me how many people were ready to help. Waited there about 5 months. Maybe, not yet. Finally he calls me in, Mr. Cucumber, and he says, listen, you have to tell you there's no chance for you to bring them out, because the Romanian government has sold all the exit visas to the Dutch, who were bringing out Kolostorban, mi? Kolostor. Apácák is.
Mine products. Mine products?
No.
מה זה הפצו?
Okay.
הפצו.
Okay. I don't know how to call it even in English. The women who give their life to Christ are called
Nuns.
nuns, right? Nuns, and
Right, please.
the men are called priests. So they needed the passports for them, so I had to give up. I went back to America, and then 2 years later they managed to come on their own. I think it's the government Israel government, who was paying under the table for each soul. But I don't know exact details about it. Okay. Can I stop now?
If you speed through going to a language, just try to speed through it. 5 more minutes.
All right. Okay, a few minutes. In 1960, after I finished school in 58, I've been to Israel, and in 1960 I went to Los Angeles. Why? Because whenever you look at the globe, the weather, it's snowing here, flood there, hurricane there, Los Angeles, 22 degrees. I swear to you, that's what made me decide to go to Los Angeles. Now, there, by a fluke of coincidence, which I'm not going to detail because of time, by 1963, I opened an art gallery. I opened an art gallery because it started like this. My landlord, where I lived, had 2 businesses, an art gallery and next door a fireplace shop. And the art gallery, he had a manager. And the manager got sick, and I was at that time looking for a job. He says, come help out in the art gallery until the guy gets well. Anyhow, got into the gallery, and within a few days I saw, hey, I can do this better than he. Because I speak languages, I know Europe. Okay, that's how I wound up opening a gallery. On a shoestring, but I opened the gallery. I went through that to 1970. In 1970, I happened to lose my lease because they were tearing the building down. By coincidence, a former client who became a friend was a director in the movies, and I was engaged to go with him to Hungary, and I worked as a coordinator of a picture called Bluegill. Do I have it? Yeah.
Okay.
As coordinator. Now, are you noticing how my life is going from one accident to another, some good, some bad. And from then on, all I can tell you is I had big luck. I can go into details to tell you, but in any case, I was lucky to make some investments in real estate when there was a depression in Los Angeles. And one piece of real estate went for 10 times what we bought it for with 3 partners. All of a sudden, there I was. The book that I wrote about an artist started to bring in, because I had a big collection of the artist's work, and all of a sudden money was flowing in. And now I'm just going to tell you one more thing, because this guy wants to kill me here.
What?
One more thing. I found myself donating $1 million to the Tzfat hospital. And here I am in front of a check. And what comes to my mind is, like everybody else, you think sometime or other, why was I born? What am I doing here? Where am I going? What's my reason in life? And so on. Nitzol Shoah has one more, which is called guilt of survival. Why did I survive? Why didn't they survive? So when I had that pen in my hand to sign $1 million check to donate it, that's when I knew that was the reason all this happened. That's what brought me here. Thank you very much for your attention. Now I'll open for questions, anything you want to ask, good, bad, and different. All right?
Let's just start by saying thank you very much, Mr. David. Questions?
Yes, I have a question. You got married? You have children?
No, I never got married. I was afraid that somebody's going to ask that question.
Sorry.
It's not late.
He has a family. He has a big family.
Did you say
All
never later than
people,
ever? Or never later than ever? That's it?
When did you came to Israel?
Oh, I made Aliyah 12 years ago. Excuse me, 8 years ago.
12 years ago,
Not 12.
2003, you came here.
No, he came and went back.
Oh, I came and went numerous times before I made Aliyah. But like I said, 1 minute, I sold everything. Everything fell into place. I had leftover inventory. I had some stocks and bonds. I had some real estate, like all business people. But to give you an idea, I have $500,000 worth of leftover inventory. You know, over the years, this doesn't sell and keeps going up on the shelf from one shelf to the other. I found all of a sudden a solution. I knew the guy who represents the Ben Gurion University in
Beersheba.
Braverman.
not Braverman. I know Braverman. First I met Braverman and I made some donations. But then, when I thought of making Aliyah and I had this problem with my inventory, I met the guy who represents Ben Gurion University in Los Angeles, and I made a deal with him. I'll give you the whole $500,000 worth of paintings. Just give me that. I made the donation. And I called up my travel agent and I said, I want a one-way ticket to Israel. What?
One-way ticket.
I have been serving you for 20 years. You never bought a one-way ticket. You always bought coming and going. I want a one-way ticket to Israel. That's how I did. And now I'm a proud Israeli. Okay. Any more questions?
No, Max.
You have a nice smile. Yes.
Did you ever go back to the camps?
No. No, that's one thing I don't want to do. Listen, our nights, because I speak for all other survivors, our nights are very frequently takes us back to the camp. And for me physically to go to see, because I know that a lot of it is covered up, you don't see. I am telling you the story, but do you think, do I know that you cannot, I cannot transmit to you what's the feeling of an hour to be in the camp, of a minute to be in the camp, especially looking at the crematoria and seeing the smoke going out day in, day out. I hope you have gotten something out of my speech here, but believe me, one thing you cannot do is to transmit the feeling of what it is, the enormity. When I say we left 1,000,000 and left 1,000 and we arrived 10%, what does that mean? If you saw trains arriving, they kept, in the last days of the war, they kept a lot of guys in the train, and they no food, in some instances no drink, and they just perished. And when they arrived to some station, they opened the door, there were all these dead people. How can you absorb that? How can you visualize that? You know Bergen-Belsen. When they found Bergen-Belsen, they found 1,000 skeletons. I even met a rabbi who was a British officer, a rabbi, who arrived to Bergen-Belsen, and he said to me, can you imagine, I had to say Kaddish over a grave of 1,000 Jews. I can go on and on. I'll see you next year.
Thank you very much.
There was a guy there.
Okay, what we'll do, we'll take some more questions, and as we do so, I'm gonna pass this, for everybody who wants to sign or sign your name and write something, feel free to write all over this. We're going to give this to Mr. Klein afterwards. And please, Robert, question?
Okay. Would you have one second? Okay, go ahead.
If you had a wish or a dream to influence everyone in the room today to act for the rest of their life from listening to you, what would that be?
You hit under the belt, man. Appreciate Israel. This is your country. If you're called in the army to defend it, be proud of holding a gun. Kiss it in my name. For all the time that we didn't have that gun to protect us. So just appreciate what you have. That's all I can tell you. Okay. What else? Well,
We have some more questions.
by the way, that was an unexpected, very good question.
That's why we have Robert here. Mr. David, thank you very much. We're going to pass by the cart and feel free to get coffee and drinks and...
He's smiling at me. If I would be Ilu Haiti Shishim
and you can line up for David to flirt with you if you would like. And we'll gather around again in let's say 10 minutes. So get some drinks and go to the bathroom and we'll gather around in 10 minutes. Thank you.
I am blessed with a good sense of humor, as you notice, and I make fun out of it, and my activities keep me going. So, I'm 87 and a half. I'll see you next year if you like. I have more to do. One of my setup, this is one of my sweethearts.
הוא אומר אותי לכולם, לא להתרגש.
לכולן.
לכולם. אין משפחה, מי מתחבר לחברה שלו?